I'm Dr. Willow Brown, your Taoist expert.
And hey there, hi there, ho there. This is Leah Piper. I am your Tantra expert at the Sex Reimagined podcast. And we have a different type of episode, mainly because Dr. Mike Frazier had us on his podcast. And his podcast is Strong Men, Strong Marriages. You should go check it out. And we liked it so much, we decided to take that interview and have it on our show. Definitely did not want you to miss out on this conversation.
Yeah, I mean, he's very interesting. And his whole niche is really helping Christian men, high-achieving Christian men, have better intimacy, better connection within their relationships and their marriages to their wives. He's got a psychiatry degree, got his degree at UCLA. He's
neuroscience degree too. I think it's
bachelor's degree in neuroscience. Very cool. So a lot of
Yeah.
bringing in the neural networks. And we just had a great conversation with him. Really enjoyed him.
I think his work is so fascinating. I can't wait for you guys to listen. I'll say more during the dish. So stay around to hear what our thoughts were and our experience was of being on his show. I think it'll be a different kind of dish than what you're used to from us. And you know what to do. What is it?
Tune in, turn on, and fall in love with Dr. Mike Frazier.
Woo-hoo.
Welcome to the Sex Reimagined podcast, where sex is shame-free and pleasure-forward. Let's get into the show.
All right, men, welcome to today's episode of Strong Men, Strong Marriages. I'm really excited about this interview with Willow and Leah. I'm going to have them introduce themselves and kind of explain their background, but we're talking about how to really use sex as healing, how to really integrate that into our lives. And yeah, they work with men, women, couples. And so Mike Frazier, MD, psychiatrist, marriage coach, I help high-achieving Christian men have more intimate marriages today, talking primarily about the sexual intimacy part of that. So yeah, if you guys could just kind of give us a sense of who you are, maybe start with Willow and then Leah after.
Yeah, so thanks for having us on the show, Mike. I'm Dr. Willow Brown. I'm a Chinese medicine doctor. So I've been studying Taoism and the body and its correspondence to nature for over 2 decades. And I really think it's important to use sexuality. So what I teach is Taoist sexuality. So when we look at those two words, sexuality is what we think of as having sex, enjoying it, being able to have an orgasm, all of that. But there's so much more beyond that, like sexuality. Leah and I have a podcast called Sex Reimagined because we're really wanting to bring forward a new way of thinking about sexuality. So you could have a sexual experience with a tree. You could have a sexual experience with a bird. You could have
what she means by that is get turned on, be lit up, be into nature, not literally have sex with a bird.
Yeah. You could have these.
Thank you for that clarification.
Yeah. Don't be having sex with birds. That's probably a bad idea. So you can have these waves, right? These waves of pleasure, these waves of erotic energy that flow throughout your body. So that's really what the opening up of what's possible in sexuality. Not to mention when I'm looking at somebody's sexuality, so I'm looking at their ability to get turned on, their ability to have, the normal kind of sex and orgasms and know what turns them on and be able to ask for it, all of that, but also what turns them on in their life, what lights them up in the world, and can they, start to experience pleasure in all of the things that they do, just daily, day-to-day things, and then take that pleasure, take that eroticism and draw it into the body. So that's where this Taoist piece and this medicine piece comes in. Can we, as human beings, take that erotic pleasure into the adrenal glands and fill up those glands with more juice, with more vitality? Can we bring it into the heart to heal any old emotional trauma? Can we bring it into the genitals if we've suffered from sexual trauma? Can we bring it into the neck and shoulder if we have a kink there? Can we open up the meridians and the channels in our bodies with this highly potent charged energy that runs throughout not only our bodies, but the entire world. It runs throughout our entire planet. So Taoism is really, they say the Tao is the way, And what that means is it's the way of nature. So we're looking to nature. We're looking at this ebb and flow that nature is always giving us. Every day the sun rises and then it sets, and the moon rises and then it sets. And so we have this expansion and contraction every single day. We have it in every single breath that we take. We expand and contract. So that's the yang and the yin, right? And they go together. They don't exist without each other. We don't have a reference for darkness if we don't know what light is. And so even when we have been through sexual trauma or abuse, or we're trying to overcome some darkness in our lives, there's some light in there. There's some medicine in there for us that we can glean, that we can learn from, that will open up the channels, the organ systems, the emotions in our body, so that we can become more whole and we can come to our relationships with more capacity for pleasure and more capacity for presence. So that's really what intimacy comes down to, is these pillars of trust, vulnerability, and presence. And so that's, that's kind of what I do in a nutshell.
Oh.
And I'll let Leah take it away on the tantric track.
So a couple things with that. So Taoist, guys, it's spelled Tao. So if you see like Taoist, yeah, it's Taoist instead. It also yang. How is it yang? Like yin and yang, right?
Yeah, you can say, you say yang, I say yang, you say potato, I say potato. It's all good.
But yeah, let's hear kind of you, a little bit of your background and story.
Sure. Gosh, I grew up in the Midwest and now live in California, and had a lot of really interesting foundational spiritual upbringing, but then also sort of shame-filled, guilt-filled conditioning. And so I came out of my adolescence feeling really sort of confused. My body felt alive, and I felt like I had to reject that aliveness in order to be a good girl. And there was also sexual abuse and trauma in my past, that went on for years and years. So I had that secret, which really established a feeling of such shame that there was something flawed in me. So I had this split. That said, oh, there's something really wrong with me. I must be really bad. But I also had this other thing that was like, God, I want to feel alive, and I want to feel connected to spirit, and I want to have this radiant life, and I want love in my life, and I want all these things. And so I had to figure out a way to reconcile that. And there wasn't a lot out there that presented a spiritual model for me in regards to the harmonious, happy relationship that was also spiritually minded. Yeah. And so one of the things that I started to look for as I, became an adult was, how do I find spiritual practices with partners who want to go deeper in the bedroom? Because I had a deep soul. I wanted to swim in the deep end. I was sick of swimming in the shallow end, and I just felt like I was intimidating a lot of guys that I would go out with, because I wanted to have conversations like this. And I had the blessing of meeting a slightly older bongo drummer when I was 18, who swept me up. And to this day is the best hug I've ever had in my life. I tell people all the time, it was like he brought me into his arms and then he inhaled me. I felt like he took my essence into his cells and then he passed his essence into mine. And it was like, oh, so good. And he breathed, and it was just so rapturous, and it was just a hug. And that was all it took. And then he's the one that had a book called Tantra, The Art of Conscious Loving by Charles and Caroline Muir. And I gobbled up this book. I couldn't believe that the things I was feeling and experiencing in our intimacy were techniques in a book. All this to say is Tantra ended up being the answer for where I could invite God into the bedroom, where I could start to dissemble and dissolve this idea that sex was dirty, save it for the one you love. Sex is somehow dangerous. You have to be afraid of sex. You're going to get in trouble, like all this stuff. Even by this point, I wasn't believing in those things, but it was still trapped in my body. Yeah. That conditioning gets stored in the tissues. And from Tantra, I started to study all these different somatic therapies so that I could heal the trauma that I had. And then went on to study positive psychology.
Nice. So Tantra, when I think of that, I'm thinking like Kama Sutra. Is that? the
That's
same
a
thing?
common
Or,
reference.
like, kind of?
Actually, technically, the Kama Sutra is not Tantra. I think it came later, maybe 1,000 years later or more. Tantra was given birth in a part of India. It wasn't India then, it was called the Indus Valley, in a matriarchal society. And this was for householders who wanted to get ahead on the God game, basically. At that point, a lot of the spiritual systems and technology that existed thousands of years ago in that part of the world was more about yoga and breath and something called brahmacharya, which is celibacy, where you're taking the sexual energy and then you're rechanneling it in prayer and in meditation, much like our priests would do or other celibate religious people from all sorts of different religious backgrounds.
Yep.
But this was a spiritual system that was meant for the householder, that was meant for the couple that was going to give birth to these monks and yogis and whatnot. But they were still going to be home. So how can they get some of the spiritual richness that these other people who are in the forest or in the monastery or in the caves, was there a path to God that they could also travel down?
Yeah.
And that's kind of how it all got birthed.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So you guys have both, Willow, you didn't talk about this on this podcast, but on your website, you mentioned you had also been through some pretty significant sexual trauma, and Leah, you just mentioned you've been through that as well. So, how this is what you guys do now, right? You help people that have been through that to kind of integrate that and kind of work through that, bring pleasure back. So, what's kind of what are the steps? Like, what's sort of the process that someone that had been through a trauma like that goes through with you guys to start enjoying it and having it be something pleasurable again?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's different for every person. And probably the most important first step is identifying that there was a trauma, because many people, it goes completely into the subconscious and they don't even remember, and they don't know why they have this block around sexuality. So it could be a specific incident that they don't remember. So bringing that to, like, even if they don't clearly remember, maybe they were 2 years old or younger or something, and they don't have like a full memory, but they know it. They know it on an intuitive level, and they can feel it in their bodies. Then just that would be the first step, is really to just be like, okay, this is here. Let's address this.
How would you guys go about helping someone uncover that?
I like to take people through somatic emotional release practices, where we actually go into the soma of the body, the cells of the body, and we look for, like, somebody might come in and they might have no memory, and I would say to them, like, well, okay, and they're having a problem with sex, like they can't have orgasms, or every time they have sex with their partner it hurts, or they just don't want to, and they can't find their desire, their libido, whatever is going on for them. We'll kind of find a root, we'll find a point, and then I'll get them into sort of a receptive state in their nervous system and in their bodies, and then I'll ask them, where do you feel that block? Where do you feel it in your body? And a lot of times it's in the heart, sometimes it's in the gut or the belly, sometimes it's in the yoni or the lingam, sometimes it's in the neck, it's in different places, wherever they feel it. And then we'll go into that area and we'll start to have a conversation, a dialogue with that place inside of their body to uncover stories. I mean, the things that come out of the tissues of your body, you cannot make up with your mind.
The issues are in the tissues.
They
There's
certainly are.
Yeah, that book, The Body Keeps Score.
Body Keeps Story, yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Fantastic book. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So you kind of walk them through that. You help them kind of find those memories, kind of speak to that part of their body where that memory is stored. And then what's after that?
Yeah, I think once they have this sort of like come to, this reconciliation, like, okay, this trauma is here, whether or not it really happened doesn't really matter. The trauma is there in the body. And sometimes the trauma can just come from society. It can come from past lives. It can come from lineage, like grandparents to pass down through the line. Epigenetics is part of all of this. So So once there's that, reconciliation of like, okay, let's heal. This is here. It's here for the healing. It's come up to the surface now. Then, we can get so much information in just a single somato-emotional release session, that basically then takes a person into a practice. And then they've got these practices like a little homework. We like to call it play work because it's not really hard to do. It's just more, it's a self-healing, and sometimes I might give somebody a Qigong practice. Sometimes I might give them a herbal protocol. Sometimes I might give them a sexual practice to do on their own, something to do. And then we meet again and we continue to unravel and unravel. And what I have found on this track and working with so many clients over the years is it goes from, most often it'll go from healing to a little bit of pleasure, to healing, pleasure, healing, pleasure, healing, pleasure. And so that's kind of how the track goes. And for, again, like I said, for each person, it's such a unique and special journey, and how much they're willing to go down that track as well, because some people want to hang on to their pain and their trauma.
Yeah.
They're comfortable in that. They know
or
how
they're
to
so
operate.
identified with it that they,
Exactly.
who am I if I'm not the
Sure.
victim? Who am
Yeah.
I if I distance myself from this thing that happened to me?
Yeah.
I had to go through my own unweaving of that. And it was a part of my healing process to go, well, I've held onto this for so long. What would it be like if this wasn't my identity? It was so liberating.
Yeah.
How old were you, Leah, when you finally liberated yourself?
Well,
Remember?
I felt
it's a
like
journey.
every year I would have some sort of shedding of the wounding around it. But I felt really like a lot of things were cleaned up. I mean, there will still be things that resurface now and again, but they're so far from each other at this point in my life. But I was really immersed in the process for probably 8 or 9 years with regular practice to free myself from feeling ugly and unlovable and unworthy and broken. And it's just a matter of time before they're going to find out, and then they're going to leave. And all that stuff would have this rippling effect of acting out, like falling apart and not understanding why there were times I just felt like I was so put together. And then these other times when everything was falling apart and it took some time to go, it's okay. Permission to be human, permission to fall apart. You're still lovable.
Yeah.
And then to believe the people who were telling me that I was beautiful. All those things were practices. And I would say that my system's slightly different from or they may be very similar, but I would describe it a little differently.
Yeah.
The thing that really, I think, helped me remember my wholeness, because it was not true that I was broken. That was a story that I came up with to sort of explain the fractures that I felt in my system. Yeah. But the truth is that I was whole. It was just covered up. And so it was wonderful to have a process to, unravel that wholeness. And if I had to describe this process, so I teach people something called sacred spot massage, and it's a healing modality. It's actually a genital massage, but we're addressing the genitals, especially if that's been the area of trauma, but we're mainly tapping into it because of all the juice and the power that's there. We're addressing the whole body. And so it's a practice that it encompasses the whole body. And why is that so important, this type of genital massage? Because most women have never had an experience where their genitals were touched therapeutically. They've either been sexualized or it's been clinical. And usually when it's been sexualized, people are taking, they're not giving.
Sure.
And so for a woman to have an experience where she is held, her body is safe with the person that's supporting her, her emotions, her unedited emotions are being tended to and are giving a space to speak up. Her body's giving an opportunity to speak for itself, and she can cry and she can laugh and she can have an orgasm, or she could be numb and then be with the confrontation that I am numb and I don't know what to do. And so what I do is I teach people how and what to do. So it's, how do you show up and just be there for her? How do you stay in the present moment when her tears are shaking you a little bit and you don't know what to do? How do you help her when she thinks, oh, you're probably hungry, I should just go make you a sandwich. Oh, I'm not coming fast enough, but we should just hurry up. Oh, I bet you're cold. I bet you're hot. And she just wants to caretake him instead of allowing herself to actually be given intentional physical love. And when you bring sexual energy to it, that's what's so powerful. That's the bridge to sex as medicine, because sexual love is unique. Sexual love is something that is like precious, and it's unlike any other love. And many people have never felt what being sexually loved feels like, because we're so divorced from sex and love. It's like we go away when it comes to the bottom down. So anyways, there's this practice. And I teach couples how to support each other, where they separate the roles of giver and receiver. And what they're going to learn in that process is, I only have one job to do at a time. I'm either the giver or I'm the receiver. And so when you know what your job is, it's so much easier to pay attention to sensation. So if I'm the receiver, my skill set is going to grow and expand for learning things like surrender, trust, opening, feeling, being seen. And the stakes go way higher when you're actually naked, because you're being seen. It is vulnerable. And then the giver, they're practicing the skill of presence and greater mastery in the quality of their touch, in the quality of their presence, in the quality of their words that have great power, and the beauty that comes from their eye contact, and their sweet silliness when it's time to play. And when we can engage in that way, we become more conscious.
Yeah.
And there's a place that spirit can come and dance with us in those moments. And it's just amazing to watch people just cry, and they're so moved and they're so touched, and miracles happen when we become intentional.
Yeah.
And we practice love. And we're not taught those things.
Yeah. With the genital massage part, is that like the couples are doing it to each other, or like you're doing that to like one of the
couples are doing it with each other.
Okay, got it.
I have been in the bedroom with couples to guide them for those people who feel comfortable, and that's, an appropriate next step for them. When you have someone who's had a lot of trauma and you are with a partner who's pretty ill-equipped, they feel so much better to have me in the room with them.
Sure.
Because I'm holding space, and it's my job to take care of both of them, not just throw them to the winds and say, good luck with this one.
For sure. I was just thinking like
if
you're the one like massaging this woman's genitals or this guy's genitals, but it doesn't sound like that's what it is.
Yeah. So what I do is, when I'm working with a couple, someone's going to be the receiver and someone's going to be the giver.
Right.
And I'm going to be coaching the giver. Okay, how's the quality of your touch? How's your speed?
Yeah.
How's the pressure? Can you see that she's opening or closing? How do you know?
Yeah.
And I'm going to be coaching her. Okay, let's give that a breath.
Yeah.
Let's give that a sound. And when you asked earlier, like, what is the process to sexual healing? What I discovered is, in the breath and in the sound is where we move the blocks. So I could go in, I could be having this intimate massage, and I can just start to feel like my heart is feeling contracted, or I feel like I can't talk, I'm kind of choking, or tears are starting to rise.
Yeah.
And when you know that part of the job of the receiver is to go, all I have to do is track sensation in my body and then give that sensation a voice. And that voice has pitch and frequency. Right? And the breath carries that sensation. So we work with reprogramming the neural circuits by using the breath and by using sound to help carry that emotional residue up and out of the body, because those blocks get stored in these 7 different energy centers that are like extensions of your brain. They carry consciousness, and it's kind of like a basement where you just stuff the stuff. You just stuff all the stress. You stuff everything that has to do with heartache. You just stuff it in the basement of the heart. Everything that has to do with anxiety and fear and being humiliated, you stuff it in your gut. Everything having to do with the opposite sex, you stuff it in your genitals. So we have these certain areas that hold certain psychological themes. And so when you consciously put 2 hands on the body and imagine that you can run a loving current from your heart out your hands, and your partner is breathing intentionally that loving energy, and then feeling the impact of that touch, and then making a sound, it's what liberates the body from the pain, from the belief systems, from the story, and then it opens us up into bliss. And so this is where I come to give you a vegetable to demonstrate what I'm talking about, which is the artichoke. So this is how I describe.
It's not a cucumber or
Yeah.
carrot. I'm
Not
not
a cucumber and not
That's
an
what's coming
onion.
to mind.
It was an onion. So we're peeling back like the layers of the energy of the
Artichoke is
unmetabolized.
technically a flower.
That's right. Thank you, darling. You were right. Ding, ding, ding. I love that.
Okay, this is a great analogy. You're gonna love this.
Yeah. So every time you do this ritual, and by the way, the ritual that I was just kind of touching into, there's beauty to it. This is where we bring beauty to sex. This is where we bring beauty to the bedroom. You set up the space beautiful as an offering to your partner, as a gift. And so you light the candles, and you give them a bath, and you do all these nice things, and you ease them into their body with lots of massage, and you're saying beautiful, loving, as you're massaging their heart, you're giving affirmations and whatnot. And as you start to come to massage the very sensitive tissue where a lot of the emotional baggage can be stored, that numbs out the pleasure, that dissipates our ability to feel our orgasms, then as you start to address and hold these particular erogenous zones, it's like you're going into the psyche of the sexual being that you're touching. And we have a version for men and a version for women. And so every time you do this beautiful, delicate massage, you're peeling back more layers of that artichoke. And in the beginning, you scrape that yummy artichoke, but you're not getting much. You're really just having butter. But it's and then you peel them back, and they get so tender. And they get more luscious, and you get to eat more of that flour. And then there's this moment where you hit the choke. Damn it, that choke. That choke is when that's when you're going to be tested. That's when you got to come home and feel the outrage and the anger and the fear and the hurt. And that's when we're getting to the heart of it, but we got to feel that choke. And that's the thing that most people are afraid of, that stops them from ever eating those first few leaves of the artichoke. Yeah. And so we have to be prepared to go, what do we do when we get to the choke? How do we handle it? You say, thank you. God, this is awesome. What else? What else are you feeling? Give it to me. I can handle it. More. And you let them unpack. And there's so much freedom in that. And then suddenly she realizes, oh my God, I got the heart now. It was worth all of those leaves.
Yeah.
It was worth that choke because it melts in your mouth and it's absolutely scrumptious. And that's her biggest, most incredible, profound orgasm. And all this time, it was just buried underneath layers of unfinished emotions that hadn't been fully metabolized from whatever trauma she had.
Yeah, cool. So yeah, it sounds like for both you guys, it's very kind of body focused and trying to unlock those memories and blocks that are there and
1,000%.
accessing.
Yeah, because you can have you can do talk therapy, you can talk circle.
It doesn't.
But if you don't address the body, you're not going to get the visceral transformation that you want. And getting into the cells and getting into the somatic part of the body is essential for healing. It's essential for letting go of the stories. It's essential for changing the psychological patterns that continue to play out in your relationships, especially in regards to sexuality. And it's just really essential to getting to the heart of the artichoke, right? To getting to that place of wholeness. And you can't have those extended massive orgasms that, people are talking about until you have cleared those outer layers. It's
awesome.
Just
Yeah, I love that because you're right. The talk therapy has its place. It's useful.
It has its place,
right?
Totally.
But I think especially for sexuality, like it's a body experience, right? And so
Yeah.
And a
addressing
lot
it
of
in the body makes a
yeah,
lot of
and
sense.
there's a lot of like not using words. There's a lot of healing
Sure.
that is not words
Not
can be so
verbal, yeah.
limiting. Yeah, they can be so confining and like Leah was saying, the sounds and the vibrations, the frequencies, all of that moving that energy through your body is can be so much more potent than, going over the story again and again, or where
Yeah,
you went
yeah.
wrong, or how
Well, and there's something about unlocking movement.
Mm.
So, if you've had experiences of feeling shut down sexually, have you ever noticed that you're stiff, you're not active?
Mhm.
And if you've ever been with like someone who's really hot and turned on, they turn you on. And usually those people, it's because they're in their body, man. They're feeling
feeling it.
themselves. And so if you want to feel yourself, you got to have permission to move. But when you have never been given permission, when that somehow something came in, a seed was planted at a very young age that said, that's not appropriate, or that's slutty, or that's this or that, whatever
Sure.
that is, it ends up limiting the expansive expressiveness of what's possible. Same thing for men when it comes to like erections. One of my favorite topics actually to help men work with is learning how to make love with a soft on, and helping them realize, do you know how much pleasure a woman can have with a soft on? We have this obsession with erections, and don't get me wrong, they're beautiful. We love them too. But for people and couples to discover that you're not just a lover with one part of you, your whole body is a lover, man. And so how do we learn how to become a lover that's beyond the pictures and images and ideas that we got when we were kids?
Or from pornography, or or lots of
what we think of as sexuality.
A lot of guys that I work with that have issues with pornography. It's something they want to stop viewing, but they have a hard time with it. And a lot of it surrounds, I think, around this, right? Not be able to integrate your sexuality as part of who you are and like part of what God meant for you. So another question around that, you guys mentioned kind of bringing God into sexuality and things like that. So most of the guys I work with are Christian. And so how does that kind of play into, like, if you were working with a man or a woman that's like very kind of strong in their Christian beliefs, how does that, how do you work with them as far as like helping them honor that, but at the same time still integrate?
Good
this
question.
This can be a sensitive topic as well, depending on the individual, I would say, and how open they are to their experience of what God is. Is God sort of this rigid, defined thing, or is it like, oh yeah, I've experienced spirit in the water, in the ocean, or I've experienced it in different places in my life and in a love connection with my spouse. So I think it depends on the individual, but if somebody's feeling pretty rigid about, God is this one thing and you can't experience God. I have a very religious father. He's in this sort of rigid category, when we totally meet on the spiritual level, but when it comes to like that word, it's so supercharged and it's one thing and one thing only for him, so I have to curate. I have to really like use a different language so that we can actually connect around spirituality, that we can be on the same page and have a conversation. And I have to use his language. I think that's one of the most important things in any relationship is like, what is your partner's language? Because you can be like, I said that thing to him 10 times and he still didn't hear me because you weren't using his language. So we need to learn each other's language.
What's coming to mind for me is like, so if someone's listening to this, I think their concern might be, well, are these girls just going to tell me like, don't believe in God anymore, or like turn it into something
God.
that I don't believe in.
We're all about God.
We're on Team God. Don't worry.
Yeah, we are.
We actually both grew up Christian.
Okay.
And so for your audience to know that studying the Tao and studying Tantra, they're not dogmas and they're not religions.
Philosophies.
Yeah, they're a system. I kind of think of them as like a technology of practices that expand our awareness of our body and expand our experience of energy. And in this time and in this era and this age, it's expanded into how can we be more sexually aware. We've had a sexual revolution, but now it's time for the sexual evolution. And this is the thing that answers that call that a lot of Christian dogmas don't have answers for. So it's not usurping someone else's faith. It's about complementing someone's faith. I actually think they're in a lot of alignment with each other, but I would also, as someone who's worked with, I mean, look, we're in the US. We're mostly Christians here. Mm-hmm. And so it's not a stretch to be really respectful of someone else's faith. I mean, I love those conversations. I want to know like what a part of their spiritual life is rich for them. So those are conversations that I want to engage, because if those are their feelings, their beliefs, and their heart, we got to bring that into the work. Yeah. That is a critical, essential ingredient to the healing that's possible.
Yeah. Your connection, your relationship with God, that's a foundational part of your life. And we're looking at sexuality is also a foundational part of all life. It's where we all come from. We wouldn't be here without it. So it's this potent, creative life force energy that we have access to, that we can cultivate, that we can move to different places in our body. We can use it to create things that we want in our lives. It's a very creative, potent life force energy. And we look at the creator, right? We look at God as the creator. And so there's a way to play with your spirituality, your connection to God, and this creative life force energy that creates all that we're sitting in.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, so, and I agree. It seems like, I mean, you're not going to read about any of this stuff in the Bible, like the stuff you guys are talking about, but it's such an important part of life. Like, we need to find things that help us learn that. Like, the way I think about it, the Bible is pretty short compared to like what your whole life is about, right? And so I just feel like there's, God has planted lots of things out there for us to learn and, grow and into and all of that.
Yeah, and I know that there's some Christian faiths have a different take on this, but I grew up both in a Pentecostal Christian church and then I was baptized into Catholicism. And what was such an essential part that was so beautiful to me is my parents helping me find a personal relationship with God, so that I could work with my own body to be connected. And so I think that that's another part of Tantra that is streamlined, that is in harmony with that religious system, is we're looking for that divine spark in each other. And one of the things that Willow and I guide our clients and students to do is to look for that divinity in everyone's eyes that they see. Because when we put our attention on the beauty of someone, on someone's genius, on the best parts of themselves, what we get in return are their best parts. Yeah. When we put our attention on their shortcomings and our judgments of them, what we get are all those things. Yeah. And so it's wonderful to have your partner look at you and see that in you, because then you get to feel it in you too.
Yeah.
Yeah, you rise up to it. Yeah, you create that inside of yourself more when somebody sees you in that way.
Awesome. Yeah, that's one of the big things we work on with guys in my program is just we're much more on the intellectual, like mental side, right? Like, how do you do this? Managing your thoughts and emotions and that kind of thing. We touch on this, right? Going into your body, like trying to feel your emotions more, like where do I feel it, name it, that kind of thing. Use some breathing, but this is definitely like next level as far as that goes. Great.
Yeah, it's a different playground, but it's a fun one.
No,
let us know when you want us to come into the men's group. Yeah, a little right. On how to feel.
That would be awesome. But I appreciate you answering that, because just like you guys, sounds like you're very respectful of people's beliefs. You're trying to help them access the most useful parts of that. Kind of, Leah, you were talking about sometimes growing up in a Christian background, you get some pretty problematic ideas about sex. You mentioned earlier, it's wrong, save it for the person you love. it's wrong. Now it's fine. But I work with men, right? And so they're masturbating, but they think it's awful, and looking for pornography, but they think it's awful. And then all of a sudden they can have sex, but then their wife doesn't necessarily want to have sex with them as much as they want to. So now they don't know what to do.
Yeah,
And,
Mike, you also mentioned like pornography being an issue that
Mhm.
that you work with quite a lot. And I think it's because of this this constriction around sexuality and this taboo around it. And then it's
Yeah.
like, but there's this energy inside of our bodies, and what are we
Yeah,
gonna do with
right.
it? We got to do something with it.
Yeah,
So we look
exactly.
to pornography, right, to get that release, to get that clearing. And then we try to be with a real woman, and it's like, wait, something isn't congruent, something
Right.
isn't computing. So I've actually worked with quite a handful of clients who have an addiction to pornography, like a real physical, visceral addiction, like a need. And there's a psychological component to it as well. And recently just created a whole program on how to overcome porn addiction, because it is really a step-by-step and a coming into your own a sense of sexual sovereignty.
Yeah.
As a male or female, both genders, all genders, any gender in between can really get addicted to pornography because of hormones. Hormones are like drugs inside of our bodies, and man, dopamine and oxytocin, I want some more. Give me another hit.
Yes, I'll take more of
another
that.
dose, another
Yum.
shot, please.
Hook me up.
Feels good.
So good. The best.
So they really are addictive. And
Yeah.
so, that's a lot of stuff is spoken on in the program around that.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I have one about pornography too. We added in as part of the main marriage program. Similar idea about what we call it your sexuality statement. Like, how do I want to use it, instead of like, no, this is wrong. Like, this is part of me. Like, how do I want that to express itself in the world? So, yeah, love it. So unfortunately, we're just about out of time here. But
goes fast.
It does go fast. It does go fast. But couple last things. So for one, you guys got me interested in like just wanting to learn more and see how your process works and do some work together. But let's say that your wife's been through some sexual trauma, or you can kind of identify, okay, like sure, I've got my issues, but she probably does too.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
what do you guys recommend as like a helpful way to encourage that, like encourage her to own her sexuality, to kind of unlock some of this, what's useful and what's not useful, as far as like kind of encouraging your wife to like work with you guys or get some help in this way?
Yeah. Go ahead, Leah.
Yeah, the very first step is to talk to someone who has experience. And so Willow and I are both good examples of that. And we both offer a free 30-minute discovery call for someone to just be able to sit and feel into it for a moment with somebody who's been there. And to just have this moment to breathe with someone else and to talk about where you feel blocked, what scares you about that, what would it be like if that wasn't in the way? Who would you be? Can you paint that picture of feeling resolved and healed and open and embracing a certain side of your sexual self, being in touch with that sexual self, being able to listen to the wisdom of that self, having access to that? So really it takes sort of understanding, where are they along their journey and where are they at in their desires? Have they done any work around connecting to their desire? And then where are the parts of their body that they start to feel sensation that has them shut down? So one of the things is like, well, what's your green light and what's your red light? What makes you stop? What makes you go? Yeah. And that can be really good information in terms of figuring out when I open what's happening, when I'm closing what's happening.
Yeah. So, I mean, so if I were to go to my wife, and say, hey, like, I heard this podcast, or I talked with these women today, they seem great, like, what would you think about talking with them? Any other ideas besides that? Just kind of like inviting.
If that's too much at first, an email. Send us an email, and just tell us a little bit about your story, what you're feeling, and what your resistance is, what you're afraid of. Is really helpful to find out.
And for men who are dealing with their spouse who is very shut down sexually, and like even suggesting reaching out to any woman is like just really too much for they know it's going to trigger their wife. It's going to be too much. Just, putting a hand on her womb and a hand on her heart, coming up behind her and holding her womb, holding her heart, and just letting her know, like, all of you is welcome. All of you is loved. All of you is cared for. I know you have wounds. I know you have trauma. I know you have pain inside, and I still love you. I still am holding you. I've still got your back. I think that's one of the most important things that women want, is to feel like they can lean into somebody. And
Totally.
it might not be true for you as a husband that you are all in. So you have to reconcile that inside of yourself first before giving that information in any form, whether it's verbal or physiological.
Yeah, and we also have, online courses and things like that where people can study on their own and they don't actually have to meet us if that's too intimidating or too uncomfortable. And beyond us, there's so many great programs out there that can help people with their intimacy.
Yeah,
Love it.
absolutely.
Awesome. Well, great. Well, again, thank you guys so much. Yeah, I could definitely see this becoming, something where we work together more in the future. So I think that would be
I like
great.
that.
But just as we sign off here, what's the best place for people to find you guys?
Well, so the website, go ahead, love.
Okay, I'll go. So you can see us at sexreimagine.com and sign up for our hot spiritual tips. We've got 3 for you, and it's totally free. It's a video tutorial. And then Willow's website is drwillowbrown.com, and mine is moreloveworks.com.
And you can find our podcast on any of the podcast platforms out there. It's Sex Reimagined, and we have so much amazing content on there.
Yeah.
It's great reviews so far.
Excellent.
So we'd love to hear from you after tuning in. And looks like we're going to have Dr. Mike on our episode one of these days real soon. So
yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Good.
Yeah.
All right. So great, guys. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And yeah, so stay strong, men. We will see you in the next episode.
Now, our favorite part, the dish.
We should really have somebody make the dishity doodah jingle. So there's anyone out there.
Have a really great voice, 'cause we need someone for the dishity.
That's right. So can anyone improve on that? I mean, that was pretty good, Dr.
That was pretty good, actually.
Yeah, maybe we just have you do it. But, it would be fun to hear from any of you who want to give it a shot. Just a dishity doo-dah, a jingle for this show. And you could be the grand winner. We'll give you something.
Submit it. Yeah, we'll give you a prize.
Yeah,
sure.
well, one day we'll have merch, and you'll be the first one to get some. So
let's talk about dishing on Dr. Mike Frazier. Let's get to the point here.
Yeah,
Okay.
Dr. Mike. Okay, so one of the things that really, I hadn't thought this whole thing through, but it makes so much sense after having this conversation. I didn't grow up Mormon or anything. I grew up born again Christian. We talk about that a little bit in the episode. But there was a very biblical, clearly identified roles of masculine and feminine from a conservative traditional viewpoint, kind of the patriarchal norm. And to hear this perspective of the innocence, really, I was sort of struck by the innocence of when you're raised in a sheltered religious kind of fundamentalist viewpoint where everyone toes the line and you absolutely believe in what everyone's telling you, which is, you're going to save your virginity. You poor teenager, all you can think about is sex, but because you are faithful, you are going to wait until you are married, and that is the right thing to do, and so you do it. And you're promised this kind of, and then you can have all the sex you want. You'll be rewarded by having all the sex you denied yourself.
It's very much a fairy tale Walt Disney kind of thing.
It's a man's fairy tale.
Yeah, totally.
What an interesting cartoon we haven't seen about that one. There's some prayers we probably would recognize, but I had never really took in the setup of that. Right? Because we have fairy tales that girls really adopt due to Disney. Yeah. But this is an interesting fairy tale for the conservative fundamentalist Christian that isn't allowed to get sex ed at schools, or none of their peers are having sex. So it's not like you're getting, hey, here's how you fuck good, you know, or here's even how you make love, or here's how you give your wife an orgasm. It's like such an off topic. It's like, maybe once you become a man, maybe there's people in fellowship where you could start to talk about this. I think Dr. Mike is actually showing up as one of those people who wants to make a difference. And he's realizing, look, these women deserve an O. We're getting it wrong. And everyone's innocent. No one taught you how.
Yeah. I really loved his I guess I would say like compassionate approach.
Yeah.
You know,
his understanding of how it's different. Like he stayed tuned in. A lot of the men that he's helping haven't
tuned in yet.
Yeah,
on that
so
level. Yeah.
so
And I think
getting
that's one of the most important things that we can do is learn how to attune to a partner, whether we're this gender or that gender, orienting to this or that, or whatever faith we're in. But just like taking the time to attune your system to your partner's system so that you can learn what is actually enjoyable for both of you together.
Because you have two people that are just so naive.
You got to slow down, people.
Because it's not like the women are being taught, oh, sex is for you too. They're being taught it's a duty, it's your responsibility.
Right.
This is how you show up as a mother and a wife.
Yeah.
But what has been happening to Dr. Mike's patients is the wives are going, well, it's not fun for me. I'm not having sex with you.
Yeah. And, you know, it's not just
tough titty.
His patients. Yeah. Tough titty.
Tough
oh my
titty.
God. That's like something my mom would say.
Really? I know, it's totally our mom's generation. Tough titty.
Yeah, tough titty.
We're bringing it back. Well,
we're
tough
bringing it
titty
back.
for
Yeah.
everyone. And so I think he's doing really provocative, important work. I think that this can definitely be useful for anybody. I don't think it has to stay just in that Christian community. I know that's his niche, but I think there's a lot of people that, especially in sheltered environments with no access to better education regarding sexuality, this is what we're left with. And this also has so many remnants of conditioning. There's so many Victorian weird values wrapped up in our bodies 150 years later.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of shame that comes with it. There's a lot of guilt. There's a lot of like, I want it, but I shouldn't want it. Yes. Like it tastes good, but I shouldn't eat it. It's just like, it's just riddled with incongruence. Like, people are just really stuck in this, like, well, where do you go from there? So there has to be an unraveling, you know, there has to be a healing, a letting go of maybe what you were taught and stepping into your own authentic truth and your own sovereign ideas about what pleasure is to you, because pleasure, you know, could be in the form of sexual intercourse or something sexual, but it could be in the form of going swimming in the ocean. That could be a sexual experience. Like, let's open our minds to the possibility of sexuality beyond what we have learned, even within a Christian realm. Leah and I both grew up with, you know, religious realms, so we get it. We know.
Yeah.
And we know a lot of our listeners have too, and you know, God bless. There's nothing wrong with what those, you know, religions bring forward if it gives you that sense of faith and that sense of prayer and that sense of devotion to a higher spirit, belonging,
there's
family,
a lot
community.
Of comfort and peace that communities of faith get to lean into. I think that's also kind of missing more and more in our culture of being able to like lean into that. I think we need that. But, you know, here's the thing that really impressed me is I went to his website and started watching some of his testimonial videos. And it was really awesome. There's this one couple who he'd gone and been working with Dr. Mike, and she just said, my heart turned back towards him. We were in church, and I felt him see me and feel me, and I felt the love come into our bodies, and I'm totally paraphrasing. And, like, they were able to find intimacy again, and he had no idea what he had been missing for so long. But you do the work, and it wasn't just, hey, I'm angry because I was promised this, you're not delivering. I'm feeling very resentful and very rejected. But once he realized that the way to the body and to getting his needs met, he didn't realize that was going to fulfill something so much deeper in him, to realize that there's a value to intimacy. There's a value to bringing pleasure to your lover. There's a connection that was missing. It wasn't just grabbing and taking his pleasure, it was sharing in the pleasure.
Yeah.
And they're crying by the end of the video. And I was just like, okay, that's God's work. Thank you.
That is God's work. I mean,
Amen.
that's why we were brought here and put in these bodies. And no matter, again, what we orient to sexually, it's like we've got pleasure centers and erogenous zones like woven into every nook and cranny of these temples that we're walking around in. People like, let's play with them. Let's keep them clean. Let's bring reverence to them.
Yes.
Let's
worship
revel
them.
Let's worship and revel in the temple of each other.
Women are so beautiful. I mean, our form, our skin, we're lovely. We're these lovely sentient creatures. And you think that the creator did not make sure that pleasure was wired into these
part of that
beings?
situation.
I mean, you think we got left out of that part?
Yeah,
Hells to the no. We just are misunderstood.
No, that's right.
So thank you, Dr. Mike, for doing the good work. I also, one last thing I want to say about what I liked about this episode is I liked his curiosity, his genuine desire to want to understand the trauma that is unique to women and their sexuality. Yeah. And I really feel like that's another kept secret that is not a normalized conversation in many of those communities. And to hear someone deeply want to know what to do, how to support, how to be there, it just,
so refreshing.
It just made my whole heart sing.
Yeah.
And it just made me just want to cheer for everyone. Made me have faith in the human family, you know, like, and I just, I feel like it's, I don't know how much of a risk or a big gap that is for him. I get that that's probably a natural extension of who he is as a person, but it made me happy.
Yeah, it's so refreshing, especially coming from a Christian male member. God bless, hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
Bring it, Dr. Mike.
Praise Jesus if you have a feeling to.
Oh, I love Jesus. Hallelujah.
Well, there you go. High five to Jesus. You should have seen Willow just now. She did a whole high five to the screen. I'm like, sure, I'll meet that hand. High five.
Oh my God, me and Yeshua, I call him Yeshua. You know, we go way back. Oh yeah, we've had some tantric moments and some ancient tombs in Ireland. I mean, I like to take my Christianity to the next level.
Yes, you take Yahshua to a whole new portal, and you channel some Mary Magdalene, I hope.
Oh yeah, baby. The Magdalens were coming through.
Cool.
All right, y'all. See you on the other side.
Peace out.
Ciao.
Thanks for tuning in. Leah Piper is a tantric sex master coach and a positive psychology facilitator. Dr. Willow Brown is both a Chinese and functional medicine doctor and a Taoist sexology teacher. Don't forget, your comments, likes, subscribes, and suggestions matter. Let's realize this new world together.